inclined plane until you get to the very top. And that is a very long ascent. It takes a long time. As a matter of fact, from the time that you get in and the coach starts until the time that you get to the top, it takes longer to do that than it does to go through the rest of the ride. You start this long ascent to the top, and then there is a very fast descent to the bottom. Friends, from a human perspective, Jesus' ministry is sort of like a roller coaster ride. Jesus has been ministering for 3 to 3.5 years. In verses 12 through 19, he has reached the summit of his earthly ministry. He's made it to Jerusalem on the back of a donkey for the triumphal entry. He is at the top, if you will. We are told that the whole world is following after him, according to the Pharisees who despised him and wanted him dead. But now he is about to begin the very fast descent to the crucifixion. Of course, he knows all of this. From eternity past, before the foundation of the world, the cross has been an established fact. And aware that his time has come, Jesus makes somewhat veiled and cryptic statements regarding his circumstances. Verses 23 and 24, Jesus answered them. Some Greeks come, and Andrew and Philip go to Jesus. These Greeks want to see you. Jesus doesn't really even address that so much, at least not directly. But he says, the hour has come for the Son of Man to be glorified. Truly, truly, I say to you, unless a grain of wheat falls into the earth and dies, it remains alone. But if it dies, it bears much fruit. Obviously, he's referring to his own crucifixion. And technically, yes, and when it comes to planting seeds, the seeds don't, in a sense, die. But it's a metaphor. The idea is the seed germinates. It goes into the ground. It's buried. It's like a death. But then there's a resurrection of that plant. And then it brings forth fruit. Look at verses 27 and 28. Here's another cryptic statement. Now my soul has become troubled, and what shall I say? Father, save me from this hour? But for this purpose I came to this hour. Father, glorify your name. Then a voice came out of heaven. I have both glorified it and will glorify it again. Then verses 29 through 33. So the crowd of people who stood by and heard it said, hey, it thundered. Others said, no, an angel spoke to him. Jesus answered and said, this voice has not come for my sake, but for your sakes. Now judgment is upon this world. Now the ruler of this world will be cast out. And if I am lifted up from the earth, will draw all men to myself. That word lifted up is a pun, as it were, or it's a double entendre, because the word lifted up literally can mean to be elevated, like glorified. It can be like someone is being exalted, or it can mean literally lifted up, to be taken off your footing is taken from the earth and you're suspended, as it were. And of course, Jesus was suspended on the cross, but in that cross, he was also exalted. He was also glorified. Jesus recognizes he is like a seed that must die and bear fruit. He understands that despite the horror of the cross, this is the event for which he was born. But what I really want you to notice is these two verses that are sandwiched in the midst of these pronouncements, verses 25 and 26. He who loves his life loses it. He who hates his life in this world will keep it to life eternal. If anyone serves me, he must follow me. And where I am, there my servant will be also. If anyone serves me, the Father will honor him. As I die, so my followers must die. My servants must forfeit their lives for my sake. My servants must follow me even unto death. Such death will bring the Father honor. Now, a Father's honor to us from the Father. Now, again, this is a veiled statement, though one familiar to those of us who are disciples of Jesus Christ. What does it mean to love your life? What does it mean to hate your life? Well, we see this imagery throughout the Gospels. If you go back and look at Matthew chapter 10, for example, verses 37 through 39, Jesus makes the same statement here. Different wording, but it's essentially the same. Making the same claim on us, making the same demand on us, making the same warning, the same blessing to us. Verse 37, Matthew 10:37, he who loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me, and he who loves son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me, and he who does not take his cross and follow after me is not worthy of me. He who has found his life will lose it, and he who has lost his life for my sake will find it. He makes the same statement as it were, in chapter 16, verses 24 through 26 of the Gospel of Matthew. Jesus said to his disciples, if anyone wishes to come after me, he must deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. Now let's back up just a little bit. I've told you this 100 times. It bears repeating. When Jesus says you must bear your cross, he does not mean, oh, I've got this bad knee and I limp all the time. That's the cross I have to bear. Oh, I've got a battle here with kidney stones. That's the cross I have to bear. That's not what Jesus means when he says you must bear your cross. The cross is an instrument of death. And when you were in Jerusalem and you saw someone being taken out of the city carrying his cross of crucifixion, he was going there to die, and you knew he was not coming back. It was a one-way trip. Jesus is saying, if you're going to be my disciple, you have to take up your cross, you have to die, and there is no return. It's a one-way trip following Jesus Christ. For whoever wishes to save his life will lose it. If you want to hang on to the life that you've got now, then you're going to be lost eternally. But whoever loses his life, if you give up what you have now rather than cling to it, then you will find life. For what will it profit a man if he gains the whole world and forfeits its soul? Or what will a man give in exchange for his soul? That's just a couple of other places that we can look at where the same sort of idea is mentioned. John says in 1 John chapter 2, verses 15 through 17, again, very familiar verses, where John tells us, do not love the world nor the things that are in the world. If any man loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life is not of God, but is of the world. And the one who lives according to the flesh, according to the world, will die, but the one who does the will of the Father lives forever. You know, I love my wife. I love my children. I love you folks. I rejoice in a fall day. I rejoice in a nice summer rain. We've had plenty of rain lately, and it's good to see it green things up, and it's good to see the cornfields flourish. I like a campfire. I really enjoy a starry night, and I'm really looking forward. Hopefully we'll have clear skies next Sunday evening when there's going to be a big meteor shower. I'm trying to think which one it is. All I can think of is the Pleiades. It's not the Pleiades. But anyway, it doesn't matter. It's going to be a great meteor shower next week. Hopefully we'll be able to see it. I like bacon and eggs. I like ham and eggs. I like sausage and eggs. I like steak and eggs. See, I like those things. There's a lot of good things in life that we enjoy, and we kind of cling to those things and say, man, these are things that are blessings from God that make life fun and enjoyable. Is Jesus saying then that it is sin to love family and friends and we are to disdain all the blessings of life? No, he's not saying that at all. We're told in scriptures to love one another, to rejoice in God's gifts. Jesus himself loved his disciples. He loved the lost. He enjoyed God's gifts. He went to the feasts. He went to the weddings. He went to all these social events where there was merrymaking and feasting. This love-hate dichotomy where you must love me and hate your parents, where you must deny all of this and embrace only me, that's a Semitism. It means that you have to change your fundamental loyalty. What is most dear to you? What is the last thing on earth you would give up or repudiate? Verse 26 makes this clear. Hating this life means being devoted to Jesus Christ, holding him as your dearest possession, remaining loyal to him even unto death. I told you about my friend Bob Moore and Gabriella, his wife. She's the one who has cancer. She's doing pretty well, better than they really expected. She has stage 4 lung cancer. They're doing some radical treatments in Arizona. They're doing some radical treatments. She travels also to Mexico to have some treatments done that our government won't allow in the United States. And that's not necessarily meant to be derogatory, but there are just certain things that she can pursue using other avenues that you can't do here. Well, we were talking on the phone. Sue and I called to see how they were getting along. We just got talking about things in general, and we got talking about missions. And how that came up, I don't know, but he made the statement. He's absolutely right. Back in the old days, 1960s, And the first missionary, the first official missionary that sort of recognized that, in the modern period was a man named William Carey. And he left England and he went to India. And there was others that went to, the Hebrides, or they went to, the Far East in places like Japan. Oftentimes those people went on the mission field and never saw their home again. Never went back to England. Never went back to the United States. Never went back to Germany. Sometimes they would go to these places like Japan or India. They'd go to somewhere in South America, whatever. They'd lose their wife. They'd lose their husband. He would lose his wife. She would lose her husband. Lose their children. I forget which missionary it was, but there was a missionary whose wife died and they were ministering to cannibals. He sat on her grave for 3 days to make sure that cannibals didn't dig her up and eat her. I can't remember who that was, but that was a story that I remember hearing about a missionary when I was a kid growing up. Friends, that's dedication. That's giving up everything. And that's what this text is teaching us. Jesus is saying those who are mine will die to self. They will die to sin. They will die to your own desires and lead a life that is patterned after my life of selfless devotion. They will repudiate all else out of love and loyalty to me. Christians are not non-Jews. Christians are not non-Muslims who live in Christendom, who happen to be born here. And after all, since this is a Christian country, then by golly, I'm a Christian. Christians are not Christmas and Easter Christians who show up to church twice a year, who follow the golden rule and give lip service to the Sermon on the Mount. A Christian is one, warts and all, who follows Jesus Christ, pledging allegiance only to him, even if it costs him everything, even if it means losing your home, your family, your life for Jesus Christ, choosing him over all else, no matter what the cost. As New Testament scholar D.A. Carson wrote in his commentary on the Gospel of John, anything less than that full devotion to Jesus Christ is a selfish, God-dishonoring idolatry, where Jesus takes second place to the gods of this world. We must never forget that the symbol of our faith is the cross. And if the cross is good enough for Jesus, how is it not appropriate for us? 1 Peter chapter 2, verses 21 through 25 says, "For you have been called for this purpose, since Christ also suffered for you, leaving you an example for you to follow in his steps, who doing no wrong, he suffered anyway. Being reviled, he did not revile in return, but entrusted himself to him who judges righteously. And he himself bore our sins in his body on the cross, that we might die to sin and live to righteousness. For by his wounds you are healed. For you were continually straying like sheep, but now you have returned to the shepherd and guardian of your souls. While being reviled, he reviled not in return. While suffering, uttered no threats. While hanging on the cross, he blessed. While hanging on the cross, he asked God to forgive his tormentors." That, friends, is what the cross is all about. Selflessness, humility, and extreme love. And that cross, which we so often flippantly wear around our neck, or have tattooed on our skin, or have hanging from our rearview mirror, is a symbol of death, self-sacrifice, shame, and contempt. And every time we see one, we should remember that Jesus demands that we take up that cross and that we die to self as he did and follow him no matter what it may bring us. Every time we see a cross, we are reminded that Jesus was a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. And since the servant is not greater than his master, how can we expect to be treated differently? Every time we see a cross, we are reminded we are to repudiate this world's wisdom and this world's philosophy. Every time we see a cross, we are reminded that this life is not the be-all and end-all of our existence. And if we repudiate it in light of Jesus, our greatest love, our greatest loyalty, our greatest allegiance, we will then find God's approval, his honor, and ultimately joy and fulfillment. One of these days, you should just go back to the book of Hebrews because the way and the road is too hard. They're being persecuted. They're undergoing hardship. Difficulties have arisen. The writer of Hebrews is saying, man, stick in there. Stick with it. Don't give up. Keep fighting the good fight of faith. And in chapter 11, he reminds them of all of these people in the Old Testament, whether it was Abraham, whether it was Moses, whether it was Abel, whether it was David, whether it was, I already said Abraham and Sarah, whether it was any number of these Old Testament saints, they continued to fight the good fight of faith, despite the fact that they never received the promise of the kingdom in their lifetime. But they never gave up, and they never gave in, and they never quit, because God was reserving the promise so that we would be able to enjoy it with them. He didn't give it to them because God had already planned that we were coming too. And he wants us all to rejoice together. But then at the end of Hebrews chapter 11, we read then, because God had provided something better for us so that apart from us, they would not be made perfect. In other words, he didn't want to make them perfect before we also came along and were made perfect with them, all right? Then, verse 1 of chapter 12, therefore, since we have so great a cloud of witnesses surrounding us, let us also lay aside every encumbrance and the sin which so easily entangles us, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and has sat down at the right hand of God, the throne of God. For consider him, that is Jesus, who has endured such hostility by sinners against himself, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. Jesus is our example of victory. Jesus is the source of our victory. It's because of him we win, but he's also the supreme example that you don't give up because glory awaits us. As we persevere to the end, then we receive the crown. Every time we see a cross, then we are to remember to look to Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, who for the joy set before him continued fighting, despised the shame, fixed his hope on that which is above. The world says, buy this. The world says, go here. The world says, watch this program. The world says, pursue pleasure. The world says that we should watch this TV program and we should experience this thrill and this excitement, and then you'll find happiness. But if our life consists of pursuing this world's loose change, living by its values and standards, if this world is our home and fail to see ourselves as pilgrims and sojourners, then friends, we forfeit our souls. But if we choose Jesus and the way this world's false gods, then glory awaits us with our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. With those of you that are helping with the Lord's table, please come forward at this time.